The next item is the evidence-based funding plan. So joining Mr. Dorr is Dr. Walker Quarles and Mr. Johnson. Okay. As you know, in 2018, the Illinois State Board of Education replaced the state aid, general aid, and summer school, general state aid, SPED summer school, and funding for children requiring special ed services, and TBI, TBE for evidence-based funding, the EBF. Making the presentation tonight, annually we have to submit to the state how those funds are utilized, and then present it to the Board of Education. That is for information only. And this is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4 and Board Goal 4:10.
So I don't want to be too anticlimactic when it comes to presentation here. However, as you can see from what is included with the board cover here, the state format for inputting the information relative to EBF funding is a fairly straightforward format that consists of drop-down menus and some fields that are either prompted to be pulled from other reports or automatically populated from other reports, specifically IDEA funding or from our Title I report and so on. And so that's really what you see here. You see just the satisfaction of filling in a state report for what really amounts to us for is EBF tier funding, which falls into $4,240.20. That is what we are getting beyond the EBS base funding minimum, which is given to all schools. So with that said, unless anybody else wants to fill any extra information in, I'll open it up for any questions you might have.
Sorry, this is just a quick question in this. I mean, it looked like it was the filling out of a required form, but I want to connect it to some of the last discussion. Our evidence-based funding number is $5.5 million. Is that what we get? What's the number that?
Right now it's 6.2.
Sorry,
6.2.
It's 6.2. I was trying to remember from. And this report just basically says we have to justify how we spend that 6.2 million.
That's right.
Okay.
In alignment to our stated district goals and so on.
Okay. Which to me seems pretty straightforward.
Very
right.
straightforward.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just going back to our previous discussion about even if we abated back 1.7 more, and we're justifying 6.2. I mean, we're spending well over 6.2.
Oh, absolutely.
In this category, so I'm not sure why I need to take the 1.7 off the evidence-based funding. In your issue, I don't.
My issue with it is the fact that, okay, if this year it's 1.7, next year I understand, it's not hard for us to show how we're spending 6.2 million, but at the same time, that's what I'm saying, we're not truly receiving 6.2 million.
I
so
understand.
part of mine is always going to have to be, how do I exactly present this? Because if we don't have a place in the state to say, well, we abated back, that's what I'm looking at. Where can we actually say that we did what you asked us to do with this property tax relief grant too?
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to link it to the last discussion too, just to get you in the game. This is fine. This is fulfilling the requirements of the state, but it's asking how we spend $6 million of our $80 million, right? Which to me, I'd rather talk about how we're spending our our full dollars as it relates to the whole evidence-based funding model, and that was a topic that the community finance brought up, and I think is we've done some of our own work trying to play with that, but right now there are ways to get the data from districts and put it into that. So I think there's some value there. I wish Ralph were here for that to provide his insight, but I think that would be something that would be of value to us.
Tom, are you talking about comparing to what other schools are doing or just our district?
Both.
Okay.
One time Ralph's not here, I don't want to hear.
I know.
Yes, you
It's a shame. He missed the cue.
Can we record that? Yeah. Oh, I guess
Now we're in here.
it's already taped. Ralph, you need to be watching
Ralph,
this.
right, what minute he needs to look at the tape for.
Oh. Yes, and also, I would just say that I don't want us to miss an opportunity to look at the various aspects of, that have to do with the school report card. And even if it's, they have a form that's required, how can we push it so that we're getting what we need out of it? I think that's what Tom was saying as well. So it could be a much richer discussion if we look at our overall budget from looking at these data points. But they require this as illegal.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the presentation of voice over internet protocol, otherwise known as voice over IP phone system contract. Coming forward is Christopher Fain and Ahmed Martin. And this item is, the next steps would be for the committee of the whole to move forward for the board meeting on November 21st to do a contract with Telecom Innovative Group not to exceed the total cost of $316,494 over 5 years. And this is in compliance with Strategic Plan Priority 4, Board Goal 4, and District Policy 4:10, 4:20.
Hello, good evening. We've got two items that we're presenting here, and what we'll attempt to do during the course of those two presentations is make the connection between them a little clearer, especially since we're talking about an overhaul of our phone system, which is pretty integral to what we do here. Currently, we're looking at a phone system that is a hybrid between two phone systems. The older of the two parts of that hybrid system is losing even the technicians that know how to fix it. In 2024, they're officially dropping support, but quite frankly, the attrition on the support for that portion is leaving the company that's currently providing that maintenance and support. And we are also looking at an overhaul of the back-end system that services our phone systems, and that's why we're bringing this forward today. We began an investigation about a year and a half ago where we were evaluating what was out there, what the industry standard solutions were, and some budgetary numbers to help us understand what we'd be looking at going into this. We issued an RFP in the summer, got our proposals in, did an evaluation of the system, and took our time to make sure that we were very clear on what we were looking at, what we'd be bringing forward, which is what you see before you today. The TIG Mitel solution is basically an in-house cloud-based solution, and I know the term cloud kind of puts a lot of folks ill at ease, and to very briefly explain what a cloud is, imagine you had 20 employees, and each one of those employees knew how to do a different job. You take those 20 employees and you train them all, so every one of those employees can do the other 19 employees' jobs as well. Then you've got this pool that you can use, and if you have one job that needs more people on it, you can pull those other people who are trained onto that job and get them to do the heavy lifting when they may have some downtime. That's essentially what a cloud is. We're looking at a solution that will bring that cloud, actually we host that cloud internally, we have redundancy internally, we have redundancy in our connections to the internet, both physically and with 2 different companies. And we'd be able to provide that phone service with levels of redundancy and disaster recovery. So that's the basics of what we have here. Are there questions that you want to dig into a little farther into that?
I guess I have a question about this. I think what the disaster recovery piece means. So if there's any sort of power outage or any sort of, server issue, are we still able to contact 911, et cetera?
Yes. So there's several layers that's involved with that scenario. For instance, if our power goes out, there is so our backup generator goes into cycle. There is no drop in the service either to the servers or the phones that are distributed throughout the building. All the points of connection between the phone that's sitting on that desk and the server that provides the service for it is all powered, whether or not we are receiving ComEd's energy. In addition, if that server were to go down, if a particular server were to go down, the internal cloud allows that to traverse. Now that job is picked up by another server that exists in our environment. In addition, we have a disaster recovery system in place so that if there was something that happened here at the building, we have an off-site location that is able to duplicate the services and the servers we provide. That would kick in and keep our services in line. Anything else related to kind of technical explanation on this particular presentation?
I just have a comment. So I asked a bunch of questions, and they were very good answers. Thank you very much for the answers and the support of it. I guess my only issue was the memo that you put out basically handed us a contract and a request for $330,000 with none of that in terms of information as to how did you deal with these risks and issues and whatever. And I guess in the future, I would prefer some of that color of the decision and the support of it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's just a request. And I don't want a 10-page memo, but I do want more than what we received.
You got it. Understood. We'll definitely do that in the future. One last point I want to bring up on the contract itself. If you noticed in there's a section that references Exhibits B and C on page 3. Carolyn just caught that. That is in reference to a project qualification form, the certification of eligibility. She's going to help us fix that language so that that will be reflected accurately, but other than that, the contract will be coming forward to you as it is here.
The second item is the voice over IP service agreement. We would also ask to bring that forward to the Board of Education on the 21st at a cost of $78,075 over the 5-year period.
Yeah, so once we settled on TIG, we actually needed carrier service to actually bring the signal in to the school and out to the school to actually send and receive the phone call. So we reached out to 3 companies, AT&T, Comcast, and Koyo. AT&T didn't respond at all to quite a few emails and phone calls. Comcast did respond, and so did Koyo. And Koyo ended up having a lower cost, and also they seem to be a preferred vendor with TIG, so we went with them.
And essentially, they're the ones that handle our phone numbers. They're the ones that actually make that phone number something that is understood to the outside world.
Questions?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
Looping back to our earlier discussions, because here in this area and last month with energy, we've actually seen a few things where cost reduction.
Yeah.
And so, those are the baby steps of what we need. So it's appreciated.
Thank you. I'd love to say it's all on us right now. We happen to be in a time where a lot of the services that we normally have relied on are becoming cheaper. And so we are constantly looking for opportunities to take advantage of those reductions in cost, and we'll continue to do so. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is the contract to hire consultant Lincoln Chandler for data analysis services. And this is not to exceed a cost of $30,000. This is in compliance with strategic plan priority area 2 and district policy 4:60.
For a few reasons, I also don't have a whole lot in the way of presentation for this one as well. But I will say that this first is kind of a rehashing of a previous report that came to the board. We have done significant work with the contract, I suppose most notably by way of the insurance that you'll see referenced in it, and also a little bit of provision to the responsibilities. They have been fleshed out with a little bit greater detail than when this was brought to the board back in September. So with that said, I think I'll open it up to questions.
Trouble.
The last paragraph I asked about, and there was a response in the note about the language of the superintendent being able to approve above 30,000, and the answer confused me more, because it doesn't, to me, the board is giving authority to spend $30,000. So then, how would the superintendent then be allowed to go beyond that? It doesn't make sense to me.
My understanding of the contract was, if the board approved the 30,000, and for some reason there's an additional 2,000 or 5,000, that additional funds are within my purview to approve, and we wouldn't have to come back to the board for that amount.
I'm curious, would that pertain for anything? Like any type of contract that we approve that's over the $25,000 threshold?
Only if within a certain confines for this.
No, I think his question is that a
Yeah,
general fact?
yeah, is this a-
Every contract?
Until unless it reached my authority limit again, then it would have to come back to the board. But the notion is that if incremental things come up, versus coming back to the board to approve those, the superintendent would have the authority to do that to keep the work flowing.
And just so I'm clear, you're authorized up to, is it 24,999?
25, yeah,
25 grand.
to
So
$25,000.
potentially this could be up to 54,000. I'm not saying it would, but just to understand.
Not an additional 50.
No, but an additional 24 to this 30. And so, okay. Tom, you're shaking your head.
I don't know, it just doesn't, that just doesn't, I mean, that says that every contract that we've approved, so we just approved a contract last time for $25,140, which means that, according to the what you just said, that we wouldn't need it to be advised again until back at $50,139, is what I'm hearing.
That's my understanding, but the board always has the latitude to strike that language. If that's what I'm hearing, if that's a concern for the board.
My recollection of when we raised the authority of the superintendent, I mean, this seems like an unintended consequence, because I'm not sure that's what was anticipated at that time, at least from my recollection of those conversations.
I'm confused too. Are you confused?
I'm a smidge confused as well, but I just want to ask a clarifying question. So what we're talking about is for this contract specifically?
That's the contract in question, yes.
Yes, so for this contract specifically, what it's saying is that if there were additional expenses above what was approved in this contract, you would have the ability to approve those up to your approval authority for this contract.
someone, is there anything about this contract or this engagement that makes this more likely for that scenario to happen?
No, because we've actually reduced the contractual agreement. I believe last year we paid Mr. Chandler approximately $65,000. And so this year we negotiated a lower contract with him.
That doesn't, I mean, again, from my experiences in approvals, et cetera, this just doesn't seem to make sense to me. I mean, if it's a grassroots, no contract, your authority is $25,000. But once a contract has been approved by the board, then it isn't it's not my understanding that it's kind of an add-on above and beyond that. It's not you can add the two together, it's either or type thing. That's my, and I'd like to understand this better because the language doesn't make sense to me.
Where is the language in question? It's in a policy. Someplace.
It's in this contract.
It's in the contract.
Oh, it's in the contract.
Yeah,
This is in
30
this-
is referenced.
This is the last paragraph in this specific contract.
And this is not typical language for.
I don't recall seeing it, that's why it.
Yeah, the intent of the language in here, specific to this contract, was to make it clear that if Mr. Chandler, or if this is language that we would use for future contracts, were to work beyond the terms of the $30,000, that there would be no guarantee, we would be under no obligation to pay, right? Unless we had previous authorization for that work to be conducted. But
Is this
that's just the
language,
source of the language.
was this suggested by our attorney? Because I know there was a lot of back and forth about,
I would need Carolyn Gus to answer that, but I believe, yes, that was the case.
so this is new language that we may see moving forward in other independent consultant contracts?
Once again, I believe that is the case.
So this is new language.
Yeah, it's new and it would be for this contract. I mean, you recommend that for other contracts.
I also don't understand why this contract is special, however. I mean, we use folks in other similar, not the same, but similar capacities, right? Like our coaches for our teachers or, Umoja or whatever it might be. Why this contract?
We would have to defer to.
We will get an answer to you on that. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that right now.
Because this is
I'm
his
sorry.
fourth year as a consultant.
This is fifth.
Okay. Yes.
I have a question about because there was a change from what he was contracted at before, is there a concern that there may be going over the 30,000 and?
Well, if you look at last year, it was 65, and we cut it over half. There possibly could be, depending on the number of hours. We really tried to structure his hours and utilize his hours, what he does in district during the daytime, and then what he does in the district for CCB.
That's why I kind of have the questions, because I know how valuable his work is to CCB, and I think my curiosity is more about, is this the actual correct rate? Are we at the right place with this contract and the amount? Have we gone too low? Have we, how did we come to the 30,000 from 65 based on these multiple years that we've used his services?
One of the reasons is CCB does not have a standard budget, and so trying to factor it in to the strategic plan and kind of pull dollars from there.
Yes, definitely fitting in with the needs of the strategic plan. Also, the previous contracts that we had did not have that finite amount attached to it, and so when we took a look at the needs of the strategic plan, what Mr. Chandler had been, Dr. Chandler had been providing in previous years, we mutually came upon this amount, right, based off of that.
I'm wondering if it's possible to reevaluate that number so that we don't have the concern of the going over.
Again, the idea, I want to reiterate what I said before, the concern about going over, there isn't, this language does not come from a concern that, oh my gosh, we could be going over the $30,000. This is meant to illustrate the fact that if something were to happen, let's say we are, very close to that $30,000 and we have one CCB meeting left, or we have one project that needs to be wrapped up, the idea is that we could not go over that $30,000 without explicitly making sure that it's an agreement signed by Dr. Pruitt-Adams. That was the intent, just so we don't automatically just slide over that $30,000. It's not because we're fearful that we are, but it's a protection for the district, right? To say that, look, we're not going to go over that amount without being deliberate about it by both parties.
If we were to strike the last sentence there, nothing really changes, right? I mean, Dr. Pruitt-Adams still has authority to approve expenses up to a certain level.
That's right.
Under a new agreement, effectively, to spend something additional to get this done. And that way, we're not putting something special in this contract.
Is that accurate, what he's asking?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, it is accurate. Yeah, I mean, the contract is for $30,000, and so you're saying basically that in order to go over that $30,000, we would need something in addition to it, correct?
You would need approval from
That's right.
Dr. Pruitt-Adams. Or
But I think that's what the concern was about, because the way it's written, it gives me that authority to do that. What I hear is, if the board approves 30,000, in my mind, what would happen if we take that language out? Should Dr. Chandler go over, we'd have to come back to the board.
So you, just my question?
That's what I think I'm hearing. Because to take the language out and say I have authority is not changing anything. And the question was, if the board approves 30,000, which is over my approval authority, and then Dr. Chandler encompasses another, say 5,000, that takes it up to 35. That's over my approval authority. And so the way I read that then would be, if you strike the language and there's a need to take Dr. Chandler an additional 5,000, we'd have to come back to the board to amend his contract for an additional 5,000.
That's correct.
I guess short of trying to change the policy tonight, I think we're missing something in our whole policy here, right? So the policy of authority might better read something like, for any contract, a X% overage can be approved by the superintendent with a maximum authority of $25,000, right? Some set of language like that would make more sense, but I don't think we have that right now.
I agree with you. That's one of the things we've also talked about as an administrative team, because technically the CFO has a higher approval authority than I do. The way our policy reads right now, the CFO can approve up to 75,000, and the superintendent has the 25,000.
So
Go ahead.
That's the current.
So currently the policy is that you have up to
I
25,000.
have up to 25.
But it would not, but because this is a contract, you wouldn't have that 25 in addition to the 30 here?
That's how I interpret it.
Okay.
But what I'm hearing is that the way the language reads, if the board approves the 30,000, anything over that is in addition to that contract, which is still more than my approval authority. So we have two options. We can either take the contract back, and I'm gonna have to say I'm a little bit hesitant, because we've held this contract a long time, since September. If the board is not comfortable approving it the way it is written, then we take it and we strike that language and maybe do what you said, maybe, I don't want to say add a cush, and then spend to that, since we're trying to also control spending. But then we just come back if we see that there's a need for an additional project, or to have something done, then we come back to the board and ask to amend it. That way, at least we can take action on his contract tonight, because he does have some invoices that need to be paid.
I have a question about how often does he submit invoices? Is it monthly?
Sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 3 months,
That seems to
sporadic.
me though that might be part of the issue, right? Like if he's submitting invoices every 30 days, then we can better control and estimate how much it's going to be on an annual basis, right? Like it's kind of incumbent on the contractor to be submitting timely invoices so that we can better assess our budgetary needs. Right? I mean, maybe that should be part of the contract, that he has to submit invoices with some regularity, or some rhythm.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression by any stretch that invoices are not submitted on a regular basis by him, but I do think that that's something we can manage, you know, and I don't know if we need contract language to do that, but it's something we can definitely manage.
And I didn't mean to
point,
send a
we need to
message
get on top of our finances, right?
that either, but sometimes it depends on the hours he spends at a specific point in time. And if it's only maybe a couple of hours because we're in PD or we don't have school or something like that, then an invoice would not, the time and the energy, I guess. But I don't want to send a message, he does not turn them in a timely manner.
And there was the issue last year, I know, with not having a dedicated person that he reported to. So there were times where there was a disconnect. Scope of work, when we're saying, I know what the scope of work is, I think. And it has to do with CCB, and then in the last years, it has been like helping with the dashboard. It was directing the discipline data. That's how we got to understand about the target data and things like that. So in terms of time, is there like percentages, CCB at percentages, data analysis, and
We haven't calculated them that way, no. We
I
could
guess I'm just trying to figure
estimate.
out how we got to 30,000.
Well, we could estimate those, we could calculate them for the purpose of this report, but the $30,000 came out as a result of, we took a look at the hours, you know, that are required for CCB as the kind of the base, right? That's a guaranteed hours. And then we took a look at, it does reference in the contract, the twice a month data dashboard meetings that he will be a part of. And then we moved upwards from there, given the fact that we knew we would have other projects in addition to those two items. But we didn't do them in terms of, you know, strict percentages.
So-
Because the work fluctuates, right? It
Right,
shifts.
yeah, and I guess it is about, what is that? I mean, I understand participating in meetings, but will there be generating reports, doing data analysis?
Yes, absolutely. He's already done that to some extent for us this school year in regards to our dashboard, framing out our conversations with that. He's participated in our conversations related to our MTSS report that will be forthcoming, as well as a few other items as well. So yes, absolutely. And that's analysis. That's helping us to interpret and understand the data, not necessarily just cranking out reports. It's
Yeah,
important to draw that distinction.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, Jenny.
I almost forgot where I was going. I feel like there are two things that keep coming up for me in this. One is that language at the end of the contract. I feel like Dr. Pruitt-Adams already has this, so for us to say it is just saying something that she already has to an extent. The other thing that keeps coming up for me is this idea of us reevaluating what her limits of, what her scope of approval ability is.
Yeah, and that's the broader
That's the broader
discussion.
piece.
Yeah.
I do feel though, in having done quite a bit of work with Dr. Chandler and understanding the ebb and flow of how the data pieces come in and what we begin to look at and the changes that have come up and the decisions of which pieces to look at, what to drill down on, like, I really do keenly understand our need to be a little bit more flexible with what will be required of him as we move forward, as we're uncovering and discovering different pieces of our strategic plan as it pertains to racial equity and other areas. So I'm actually appreciative of that language to the extent that it gives us the leeway, will give the administration the leeway that they would need to ensure that we're able to accomplish what needs to get accomplished, to make sure that we're actually looking at the right data.
If it's not too premature to try to nudge this towards a conclusion for tonight, I am supportive of this as is, provided that Superintendent Pruitt Adams advises us if this does happen, which I'm confident she would. We did go over, talk about this at length in November, so that's my feeling. That's of any help to the discussion.
Any other feedback? Dr. Pruitt Adams made the suggestion of moving forward, and if there were need for an addendum or if we strike that language because it's understood and I mean it's a part of the policy. And that's why I was asking why are we putting this in now? And I know that we had to go back to relook at his contract, and there was a lot of input legally that seems to have confused more than clarified some things. So is anyone needing the contract to be revised, or can it move forward?
Striking that last paragraph, or is that
You mean that last sentence?
That last sentence.
So Tom, you're saying you would want, you...
Are you making a motion?
Pardon?
Are you making a motion? I'm not clear.
No, we're not voting.
Voting on it to the special.
We're not voting.
Oh.
I mean, I've raised it, and you know, this does prompt a broader discussion about who can reapprove, right? And the concept is the highest level who approved an initial contract, can someone else over-approve it, which is what this discussion is. And I think there's concerns there, but that's a policy and approval discussion we need to have, because there's a lack of clarity, right? And this surfaces it just because it explicitly states that the board approves something and then someone else, the superintendent, can over-approve it, which is a bit...
And we could bring that policy back, the policy that addresses that is policy 4:60. We can bring that back.
Yeah, so that's the separate discussion. So in terms of this contract, where are we?
Can I suggest something that the language is not to exceed? It could be 23,000, it could be 28,150. Maybe we bump it up to 35,000, or whatever we think, and still try to keep it below 30, just to give this leeway. I think that might, is that okay to change a number on this without going back to lawyers?
Yeah, my perspective, and I think Gina was going there, is that the board is being asked to approve a contract. It should be a contract for the value we think we need, and we approve it. And then if it needs to be reapproved, it gets reapproved by the board. Now, there's probably some tolerance that needs to be baked in there.
Yes. And so going from 65 to 30.
In that context, that makes me feel like we can nudge it up, knowing that previously it's been more. So in this case.
Yeah, my point was specifically, did we contract are we contracted at the correct amount? And if at this point, what I feel is if the administration feels that we are contracted at the correct amount, then we move forward. I'm personally in favor of moving forward with this contract as it is. as long as we're moving into the additional conversation that we need to have, what Tom's mentioning, approval above. And that policy for, what did you say, 4:60?
So
I
that is
think-
the separate discussion.
Yeah.
So that's the question I'm asking. Who's clear with this contract as it stands? Or do we need to revisit? I know we have to have the separate discussion about the policy 4:60 and that procedure, but for this contract, are we ready to move forward with it?
Yes.
So I have a yes and a yes.
Good.
And I'm
a no.
you're a no?
I have a preference for striking the last sentence, but I won't vote no.
Okay. Sarah?
I am agree.
Okay, thank you. So we will bring forward policy 4:60, but now we have direction that as this states right now, we are moving forward with it.
At the next, in the special.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that concludes all the items. I think we just discussed the future agenda item.
Yes, we did.
It's the revisit of policy 4:60. I would also like to suggest that we revisit, when we revisiting policy, the secession policy, because it is not a true secession policy.
Is that the policy that says your approval amounts? Or is
No,
4:60
that's just a whole
that?
different policy. The succession planning policy, as it reads, is not truly about succession planning. So I'm just offering that as another board discussion.
Okay. So we have two policies to discuss, and we also have to talk about how we decide which policies we need to review as well with a policy committee of which Ralph has
What time is it right now?
has
We just gotta tell them all the
volunteers
times.
to be a part of, but we will make sure that happens. Okay, Jean.
The other overarching issue that was brought up about the approval amounts?
That's
and-
4:60.
That's code. Thank you, that's what I wanted to make sure of.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Any other agenda items?
There's a future thing I want to mention real quick, so you all can clear your calendars again. November 16, November 23, go rake the leaves, the iGov assembly is not locked in, and so I don't know when or if it will happen this calendar year, but just so you know, I sought direction yesterday and just still nothing clear. So, heads up, no iGov assembly this month is my promise to you all, because it's not locked. I don't know. They're trying to get the schedules together of the guest speakers, so just wanted to give you that heads up.
Thank you. All right. Well, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.